Well, I am honored to be here, more than anyone is honored to be here, I would say, but that's obviously not true because I have so many faces out here tonight that I'm so excited to see, and I wanted to thank everybody for coming out and getting to know me a little bit, and more importantly, getting to know Blue a little bit. Logan has done a better job introducing Blue, Supernova Press, and myself than I could, I think. And I didn't write anything, because I didn't know who would be out here tonight. So thank you for that, Logan. So I'm going to read from the first chapter of my book, which is titled, I should know this, The Bitter Sting of Chains. So, Chapter 1, The Bitter Sting of Chains. The world ended long before we knew it was over, and by the time we noticed, we were too late to stop it. The man thought to himself as he crawled in the sun-baked earth, feeling the pebbles and twigs cast imprints across his hands. The sun split his forehead, and sweat trickled across his parched skin, stinging his eyes. A hot, shaky breath crawled from his lips as they parted, pushing past his swollen throat. Worker WLL29809C, I have removed 7 credits from your account, citing Section 32 of the Workers' Protection. The cool, iced voice of electronic chips and wires hissing together spoke from the soil beside him. The round, metallic orb heaved a cart of dead cornstalks beside him, informing him as he worked. It had tiny wheels spun from resin over steel rims, digging ruts into the earth as it rambled off its reasoning, quotas unfulfilled, unremarkable work, and floundering company time. The man felt rage simmer beneath his skin. That's a full day's work, he thought. Now I can't buy new work boots tomorrow. Verbally respond, the voice said. Yes, Wolf muttered absently, listening to the incessant humming of the ball. The robot was no larger than a grapefruit, a resin ball wrapped in an aluminum shell. The metal ball went quiet, regaining its lethargic march across the hillside, dragging its cart behind it as Wolf followed, picking up the dead stalks from the field. The workers aptly named the robots slow-mos, or just Mos for short. He leaned back on the balls of his feet and rolled his neck in circles. He blinked dirt loose from his eyebrows as he rubbed his face with a clean elbow, looking up from the fields and towards the horizon. A mirage spread before him, encapsulating the hills in a shimmering cloud of light. He squinted through the haze, gazing over the arid landscape alive with ants like himself, mulling in the thousands. The unseen, unskilled figures, shapeless in their multitude, ambled through the same sandy soil as him. The year was 2067. The May rains hadn't come as they should, and the crops withered, leaving nothing but an accumulation of death in place of corn. Now the workers would collect the remnants, and the sky would burn russet for months. Then, Besna would spray the fields to simulate a faux spring, manipulate the skies to force the rain, and the workers would pick it endlessly until the winter came. Wolf rose at dawn, crawled through the fields during the day, and slept when the sun slept. Since his temporary relocation 3 years ago, his 2-week stay bled into months, and the months into years. He felt himself dampen under the sun's oppression. 2 months after he'd arrived, they had stood in the darkness and the rain, watching a screen above them in the plaza. The grass sank into a grayish sludge during the long winter months, and the rain had fallen endlessly. Winter lightning shattered the black porcelain sky, and claps of thunder tore the heavens in half, letting loose torrents of rain. A man stood on a freshly erected podium, hands crossed, head arched. His gray tie was shining black, slick with rain. I had prayed we would live in peace, he said, that your savage, lazy instincts wouldn't take over as they have before. A video played above his head, and they watched it twice in its entirety. Each time, a new host of horrors they missed the first time came to light. A brown-eyed woman was attacked by blue-eyed assailants. Feral white dogs with cobalt eyes feasted on bodies. Blue-eyed men wielding spears of glass screamed as they dragged men and women down alleys. Officers dressed in black, each with a golden eye sewn on their left arm, right breast, chest, and plastered on the forehead of their black visors, trolled around the plaza in trucks. The letters BESNA, standing for the Brown-Eyed Society of North America, were sewn across their chests. They carried large metal poles with spinning, twitching spikes in each of their hands. Wide golden eyes were shining on every wall, etched into every glass window, and hung from every windowsill. They attacked my daughter in her bed 3 days ago, he said, his chest rising and falling. Wolf could feel the same chill he'd felt that night run down his back again, staring up at the brown-eyed man beneath the canopy of rain. He told them thousands of high-ranking officials' personal information had been leaked to the public, making them the targets of extreme violence. He had told them it ends today. To address the large breaches of privacy, BESNA has lobbied Congress to pass the People's Endangered Privacy Act, or PIPA for short, and they all watched, waiting. He said they would increase security by almost double. He told them all rumors and fabricated information would be strictly controlled. He said that all information about Parliament and publicly owned businesses would be made unavailable to the public for their safety. With an evil glint in his eye, he told them they would begin questioning certain individuals deemed to have sensitive information in transgression of PEPA. Lies, he said, led to the death of my colleagues. They lost any idea of the outside world after that day. What countries remained or who the Prime Minister was, what laws passed or fell into oblivion. The weekly updates turned into monthly updates, then bi-yearly updates, and then not at all. No news, no elections, no changes, nothing. Nothing but whispered rumors and thoughts. Your shift is finished for the day. Due to the exemplary service in your field, you are eligible for the 1,000 credit raffle this week, Mo said. The moment he finished speaking, the cart rumbled between the rows and sunk into the setting sun, kicking up dust behind it that glittered against the crimson light. Wolf never knew where it went. No one did, but it would be empty and ready to be filled tomorrow morning. Wolf stretched his back, feeling his vertebrae cry. He watched through parted eyes as figures listed towards the hills in front of him, congregating in a dark, trembling mass a few kilometers ahead of him. Beneath him, Wolf dug the heels of his ruined boots into the crackling earth beneath him, and he walked until his throat burned. The sun felt hotter, the air heavy, and the lack of moisture pulled water out of his eyes and skin, baking him from the inside out. A layer of dust shimmered in the air, basking in the burgundy heat as Wolf came upon a group of workers. At the center of them, a tall, erratic woman flung her arms open, her lips and head shaking back and forth as she spoke. "And that's not even the worst of it. I lost half my credits today," she yelled. "I'll have to skip supper tonight," she yelled louder. The workers gave a symphony of sighs, ticks, and tuts in her defense. "A pregnant woman on top of it all," she added, cradling her stomach. "Animals," a short, fat, beetle-shaped man grumbled, pacing in circles, waddling like a penguin. "Then they wonder why we try to kill them out east," he said, sinking into a circle of people, whispering rumors to each other of an army pushing down into what was once California. "No, it's true. I heard they're lynching any blue-eyed escapee from any of these sort of places," a woman whispered, her eyes pinched shut like a rat. Yes, that's what I'd heard," a pumpkin-shaped man crowed. "The country's been broken into 100 provinces, all with their own horrible punishments if you're caught. It's a different world for sure. And the hospitals, they say if you get sent there, you come out a different person." The rumors came back from the ditches, the fields, the factories, and the re-education camps. They ranged from Prime Minister Windthorst being a blue-eyed man in disguise. BESNA officers are actually cyborgs behind their visors. There was a gigantic war pushing into the country from the Rockies to free them all, and this was just a massive alien conspiracy to show humanity's true colors. And the list went on forever. Every rumor had 100 alternatives, and every alternative 1,000 variations. Wolf didn't care for rumors, yet he still heard them, as everyone did. Whispers of oppressive overseas regimes, assassinated prime ministers, festering decade-long wars, and wicked plantations in the east. The whispers came and went, but nothing ever happened. At best, they got him hopeful. At worst, depressing. He stood and listened while he waited, watching the other faces swirl, cast eyes over shoulders, and sink closer against each other as they murmured. Eventually, the earth creaked as the familiar sound of heavily armored trucks rumbled up the dirt road, coming to collect them and take them back to the Redemption City Workers' District. They clambered into the truck beds as silent, armed guards dressed in black watched them. A plume of brown and gray dust oscillated in the air as they rode on heat, raw, shattered hills, desiccated and devoid of movement or life. They sat in absolute silence, eyes always trained on the guards, disciplined from years of practice. They swept through the fields beneath heat as the blinding sun, like they had this evening and every evening before. The self-proclaimed jewel of the coast towered over the horizon as they rode. Sunburnt walls floated along the edges of the sea, pushing the swell of water back along the relic of an ancient coast. 20 years of swollen oceans and melting ice caps rammed an extra 13 feet of water against the off-white hydroelectric dams that allowed for kilometers of white sandy beaches to run the course of the city. Monstrous skyscrapers disappeared thousands of meters into the sky, twisting glass and metal physiques tapering off above the clouds. The workers' eyes trained down the white towers to their bases where the suburbs and parks lay, buzzing with millions of tiny shadowed bodies, the distance shrinking them into non-existence. Even in Wolf's youth, the city was heralded as one of the world's environmentally friendly cities, second only to Mexico City. A city free from emissions, guilt, and smog. A city of the future, of glass and metal, of wooden roofs and solar panels. The south side of the towers were sparkling green over their white frames, crawling with enough vegetables and hemp to feed and clothe the city for decades. The rooftop fans spun. Walls of black solar panels reflected the sun down on them, and the entire city hissed with life. They gazed down towards their homes as they wound down the dusty hills. At the base of the city, the former towers and skyscrapers of the future looked like primordial huts with their dated veneers. Their lack of glass perforated space and time, their ashen hue a blight against the edge of Redemption City. Wolf and the other workers were packed into those archaic, crumbling buildings like rats on a ship. They were boxes to be stacked and unstacked, moved and shuffled whenever someone thought best. They ate on top of each other, peed on top of each other, and slept on top of each other. It's easier to treat us like animals if you make us sleep in filth. If you make us look and act like animals, it's easier to pretend we aren't prisoners, not humans, Wolf thought, souring what bitter remnants were left of his mood. They crawled down the hills into the only entrance to the Redemption City Workers' District. Tall, tepid stone walls adorned with barbed wire circled their home, while guards watched them in silence, marching in lines with guns. The officers lived in the black and gray walls, watching workers through the dark glass windows, waiting to destroy workers with their turrets if they stepped out of line. The guards claimed to be unbiased. We only wish to uphold a good understanding between different people. There are only a few bad guards, if any. We're not all bad. Everyone knew it was a lie, as when the batons came out and the bullets flew like dark black bats into the workers' skin, there was only silence. The well-reasoned guards, if they existed, were silent. There was only oppressors and those who watched oppressors. Wolf stepped out of the truck across the threshold of the ghetto. A teacher from Colorado, taught calculus for 40 years, broke bylaw 47, Wolf heard murmurs as they passed a body. Wolf didn't know the bylaws. No one knew the bylaws. This was simply life in their new world. Work, earn credits, listen to orders, and sleep. That was it. Sure, maybe once in a while they'd splurge their hard-earned credits on a phone call or a drink, but mostly Wolf spent his credits on extras like toothpaste, clean socks, and new work boots. Wolf walked against the string of machines lined against the courtyard's edge and held out his arm. It spat out a block and an apartment number onto his wrist, followed by a golden eye, and he started drudging himself through the streets under the dusty monoliths and waving gold and brown flags. Every night, the workers were sent to a new building, new floor, or a new apartment. Wolf had yet to see the same room twice. The gangs, viruses, and drugs swirled through the ghetto like a typhoon battering against the walls. Wolf moved through the streets towards one of the several mess halls at the bottom of the office buildings. Throngs of people passed, all covered in blood, dirt, or manure. The tallest concrete skyscrapers between them were filled with metal beds and factories, pumping steam out into the air. Millions of them lived crammed together in what was once the northeastern corner of Los Angeles. Wolf tapped his wrist against the plastic square embedded in the counter, taking 3 credits from his account. He grabbed a plate of slurry off the counter and ate it. A mashed pile of unknown vegetables, a lump of plant-based meat shaped like a ball of rubber, and a handful of pills and vitamins. Wolf scraped the last of his food into his mouth and ambled back into the street, head down, eyes turned towards the pavement. Every 30 feet, there was a P&T dispenser in places where benches and planters used to be. Men and women were curled around it, pouring credit after credit into oblivion, huddled in masses along the gutters, weeping and shaking with need. Wolf watched their faces, warped in their own individual pleasure. Everyone knew they'd reach a point when they took the tiny yellow pill that let them glide through their day without caring. Wolf would, eventually, inevitably. Wolf walked past them. Wolf turned his head away from the wall of building-length billboards beside him that shone day and night. C-list celebrities that had fallen into obscurity tried to remind the workers that drugs numbed all pain, sex kept your mind busy, and gangs gave them a sense of community. And they did, for a minute, and then they came back to reality, desperately searching for their next moment of peace. Wolf continued towards the end of a line of apartment buildings, then turned down a street of 60-year-old office buildings. The brilliantly black pavement sat unused and unbroken, blistering and shining in the heat. There was no garbage and no piles of decay. Everything was clean, immaculately polished, and primed. Wolf looked further to the north, walking with apartments on his left and tall office buildings and condos to his right. Once the city was divided by class and not eye color, an ideology that had long fallen through the cracks. Blue-eyed people have always been public enemy number 1, they said they were told through their screens and their ads every night. Every CEO and politician reminded everyone that anyone who dissented was a liar, a traitor, and a communist. 2 guards stalked the street across from him, and he slowed. Behind him, 5 more guards came around the corner of the street and stopped to harass a young woman and her child standing in the street. Children were a foreign sight in the city, and Wolf let his eyes follow them as they walked. Most of the children of the past were gone, and city officials forbid children born under their constant surveillance from reading or writing. Reading and writing requires thinking, and thinking will turn them against them. They were testing the boy in the streets. 2 guards held the mother back, while others lulled the boy into a false sense of security. They spoke to him in gentle voices, just long enough for him to point out a few signs, correctly babbling out a few words he could read. Then they were gone, taken to be separated. Wolf tried to pretend things like that didn't bother him, but he was lying. Wolf came to the far northeast west corner of the ghetto. A tall, cream-colored condo towered above him, a mere 50 stories high. The numbers on his wrist matched the numbers on the side of the building. Above him, a golden quote hung. "Intellectual honesty is at the heart of all we find pure." As if, Wolf thought to himself. The Order of Truth and Justice was an 88-page novel that dictated their place in the world. Written by Dr. N.B. Hanley, he believed that the dominant, brown-eyed majority were superior to those saddled with a blue-eye mutation. Hate crimes rose, the news spewed rhetoric, politicians yelled over their podiums promising to solve the blue-eyed problem, and still, it wasn't enough to push blue-eyed people into action. By the time the first ghetto was built, it was years too late. The hate had been bred in silence, in all the dark, recessed places where disillusions of truth grow. When the first people were shipped into clearings and shot by black-suited men, it was too late. When Besna lobbied the government to create Brown-Eyed Protection Acts, it was too late. When Wolfe saw the leaflets raining over his school, telling the world that blue-eyed violence was the single greatest threat to the country, it was too late. When people cared more about the innate color of one's eyes instead of their intrinsic humanity, it was too late. What could I have done? Wolfe asked himself. I was just a kid. People with blue eyes are more prone to alcoholism. Despite making up only 8% of the population, they account for almost half of all serial killers. If you have blue eyes, you're more likely to develop stage 1 diabetes, more likely to go deaf, and more likely to have endometriosis. It's nature's cripple, said the quotes. They did this, Wolfe thought. But who are they, he asked himself. A conglomerate of corporations that wanted cheap labor? A rogue government that wished to gain an iron hold over their citizens? Or was it a group of brown-eyed people that wanted to be on top so severely that they made this new world a reality? Yes. Wolfe held his wrist out to the sleek metal scanner mounted to the right of the doors. The scanner beeped, the doors pushed open, and a burst of air rushed over him. They closed behind him as he stepped through the doors, locking him in until morning. Wolfe passed through the packs of people talking on the floor, refusing to look down, ignoring their empty words and meaningless chatter as they tried to pass the time. A couple was nestled in the corner near a laundry machine. The intimacy that should be there was replaced with glazed eyes and still hands. Wolfe locked eyes with her. No anger, no joy, no fear. Nothing. A dark chasm Wolfe could lose himself in and never be found. She seemed to study Wolfe. Then she blinked and refused to open her eyes again. Wolfe walked upstairs, listening to their voices dissipate beneath him. Who could she have been? A teacher? A writer? A farmer? A mechanic? Then it didn't matter, and Wolfe pushed her black eyes out of his mind and thought of nothing again. The next day, week, month, year, and decade would be the same. Though Wolfe wanted to sleep, he feared the nightmares. The memories would come back when he was too incapacitated to hold them at bay, and he'd be forced to relive his life from 16 to 20 again. Then when Wolfe awoke, he went back to his life. So do you want to do like your... So I guess we'll take questions now. Does anybody have any questions? Making my job very easy for me, guys. Yes.
I was just wondering, where did the spark to write Blue come from?
Oh, that's a very good question. So I would have to say, so it was during the George Floyd protests in 2020. And there was a lot of rhetoric, and there was a lot of misinformation. I wouldn't say misinformation, I'd just say rhetoric, to be honest. And I was thinking to myself, how would I bring such a complex issue and present it in a way that everybody can understand? Because everybody, obviously, has the color of their eyes, but it isn't questioned. It's just whatever. It's just, I like to say, it's just eye color. And then what started the spark to write it is, I guess, I was doing research, and I was researching, I was looking at stuff online, and then I found Jane Elliott's blue-eyed and brown-eyed experiments that she did in the 60s and 70s. And that was where she would take a classroom and she would divide half of it into brown eyes and half into blue eyes, and she would pit them against each other. And so I thought, well, she's a very wise woman. And so I would take that and I would build on her idea and expand it into an entire universe that everybody could experience by reading the book. And then as for like spark and what took it to write it, a lot of passes out there. And now once it's done and it's out there, I don't know if I'll ever write a sequel, but I think, I guess it might be a little, like, spark-wise, it might be, I think the word anger might come to mind, because that was such a passionate time for society when there was discussions of George Floyd and police brutality, institutionalized racism, and I thought, well, we just have to talk about it, I guess, is the most important thing. And that's what I hope Blue does. I hope people talk about it and they think about it and they say, oh, my aunt has blue eyes. That's interesting. And then those sort of conversations, I guess, like around dinner tables are the important ones to have. But thank you for the question. Do we have any other questions?
Did you pick the name Wolf for the hero because it's an animal name?
No, so that's a very interesting thing you brought up, because no one's ever asked me that before. So what I did is, because when I grew up in Saskatchewan, and more specifically the area around here, and I wanted to tie my experience around racism and around prejudice to the book itself. And so I thought, what would be interesting for all the names in the book to be drawn from real life towns and cities in Saskatchewan. So Wolf was a village about 30 kilometers, 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers, whatever, from the farm where we are now. And so every other character in the book is also named off of towns, villages, hamlets, resort villages, cities around. N.B. Hanley, for example. N.B. Hanley stands for North Battleford. I'm not sure anybody wants to know that. And then Hanley is obviously another town. One of my favorite, I think, is, I was talking to somebody once and they said, oh, they're from Bredenbury. And Bredenbury is one of the less than desirable names in my book. And I thought, well, what do you know? Like, you know nothing about your town, obviously. And so Wolf, I spent 2 years writing Blue with a stand-in character name, which was Jacob. And it didn't come to me until I think probably the 8th or 9th or 17th pass through the book when I was like, oh, we'll name him Wolf. Because it was something interesting. I Googled and I found on Wikipedia that very few characters already have the name Wolf with an E. So I was like, that's what we're going to try this time. And it just felt right, I guess. So thank you for your question. Any other questions?
Did your idea for the book ever change in between your time writing it and your very first thought for having it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when I wrote my letter that I put in the front of the book, reminding people that it is a fiction and not to get too mad if they got upset, I'd said, originally, when I wrote the first chapter, Wolf was a 13-year-old girl from Indonesia. That's how I started the book, standing in mud up to her knees. And so after that, I said, well, I don't really know much about Indonesia, to be honest. I'm going to try North America. And so we switched North America. I switched main characters, and I switched pretty much everything from where I started to now. But it did originally, and so much has changed from that first time I wrote it. There are 5 or 6 chapters that aren't in the book, and arguably there are more chapters that didn't need to be in this one either, but I liked them, so they're here. But I went through many, many iterations and many different scenes that don't exist anymore, and I think what's so interesting about that is that they're all up here. I'm the only one who knows what those scenes were, and that's exciting for me, you know. Maybe they'll be in the next one, God forbid, if I want to spend another 2 years writing another book. But thank you, yes. Any other questions?
Are you writing any right now, like another book?
I am, yes. I'm right. Not a sequel to Blue, which if I ever write a sequel to Blue, I will call Green. But yes, I am writing. I'm working on 2 other books right now. One is called The Homesteaders, and it is set in 1927, rural Saskatchewan, and it follows a group of German immigrants as they are tormented, I like the word torment, by unseen forces on the prairies. So it's a historical fiction horror novel. That one is set to release this winter. And then I have another one, 273 Days, which chronicles a young man in BC who, upon getting a less than savory medical diagnosis, decides to go on a 9-month cross-country road trip across Canada. And he has 273 days left, and that's what he's going to spend doing on those last 9 months of his life, is traveling Canada and meeting people and learning about the country and everything that makes Canada Canada. So that one I'm really excited for. And then I have 24 other ideas that always pop into my head right before bed. And so that's why I have a wad of paper on my bed, that I'm just like, time for bed, and then you gotta turn my lamp on, and I gotta get my pen out, and I scribble for about 45 minutes, and then I find them crumpled up under my bed 2 days later. So those might be books one day, but they started off as crumpled pieces of paper under my bed. But thank you. Yes, that was a very good question. I love questions because I just get to ramble and ramble and ramble, which is very exciting. Better than the book reading, in my opinion. So do we have any other questions?
What other people or influences helped you to get this to the final product?
Oh, yes, that's a good question too. Lots of good questions. I have a very nice audience today, and that's the key, hey? I would have to say I drew a lot from, there's 2 answers to the question. So for the book itself, I drew a lot from dystopian authors, right, and novels. So I read everything I could get my hands on. Lots of George Orwell, not lots of, but The Handmaid's Tale and Fahrenheit 451. I reread The Man in the High Castle, which is a speculative fiction about a society where the Nazis won World War II. And so I think the question, like, what if, is a very, very powerful question, because all of my books start with that question. What if blank? What if blank? What if blank? So dystopian authors were really helpful for me for that. And then as for the subject matter of the book, I only ever put stuff in the book that had already happened to historical minorities. So a couple points in the book are a little visceral, but I only drew from the Holocaust and the residential school system, the the Atlantic slave trade, Irish indentured servitude are a couple of the things that I thought, because I've heard a couple of people say now, well, that's really horrible. Why'd you put that in there? And that was my point, is that it's happened to minorities in the past. It just might be blue eyes next time. Or it might be because you're under 5'6", or because your hair is curly. So I wanted to use examples of stuff in the books that have already happened, as more of a warning, I guess you'd say, right, against just blindly doing something, or worse yet, saying, I don't like you because of blank. Hair color, eye color, skin color, sex, race, whatever. But so lots of different things went into this one, but thank you. Any other questions?
This isn't actually about the book, but I'm curious about your publishing. Like, so you started your publishing house, and so are you publishing only your own books, or would you publish other people's books? And if somebody had a book they wanted published, how would they go about going through you to get it published?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Supernova Press, I started Supernova Press not with the intention to publish my own books, but that sort of came through it in the end. But Supernova Press is currently open for submissions, which means that anybody can send me a manuscript, send me a bit of their writing, and if I like it, hopefully we can work together. The publishing company works with the individual authors, sign contracts, that sort of thing, edits the book, and then gets it out into the world. So, which is a reason that Supernova Press is so thankful to be a part of SaskBooks. Hence the Sask Book Week today. SaskBooks is obviously an amazing organization, and it wouldn't run without a lot of funding and a lot of really talented people who make it work. So SaskBooks gets to work with SaskBooks just a little bit, just to help get all those books out into the world, and among other things, so bookstores, distributors, that sort of thing. But yes, that's what I said about rambling. Supernova Press does publish other people's books. It hopefully in the future will publish mostly other people's books, far beyond my own, and I will go to a different publishing company with my books that are a little more suited for uniquely Saskatchewan audiences. And then if someone's looking to publish through Supernova Press, they would just Google us, supernovapress.com, and they would be able to find all the information they'd need there, send us manuscripts, mail us manuscripts. If someone were so inclined as to do something as exciting as that, I'd love to get a manuscript in the mail. The post office might not like it, but I'd be excited. Thank you. That's a good question, yes. Any other questions?
So does Supernova Press have like a whole team, or is it just you?
So we use a lot of freelancers. I am the owner and I am the founder of Supernova Press, but I use a lot of freelance people for my work. So I say us just to be representative of the people who aren't a part of the company who work, but I am the technically only employee. So I have other people do the designing, I have other people do stuff like that, because yeah, it's just me, with lots of freelancers who help make it run too. Just obviously they aren't employees of the organization yet. Thank you. Any other questions before we finish up here? Must be pretty close. It must have been, I feel like I read for 6 hours. So. Oh, there's a clock.
Don't look at that clock.
You got lots of clocks.
Oh, I have options. So do we pick the one that's closest or not? Anyway, do we have any more questions about Blue, about me, about the publishing company?
Just a comment, I really like how you put the two books. Like that's the back cover and then the front.
That was intentional, yes. We designed that in mind, and I wanted to do that for the book launch, but we didn't have book stands. So we were lucky enough to get book stands today. Yes, thank you.
Very catchy.
And you're selling them?
Yes, I am. They're $35, just so everybody knows. Any other questions before we finish up then? Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you to SaskBooks. Thank you to the North Battleford Public Library. And I thank Supernova Press, but that sort of, I'll do that on my own. Thank you.